Good evening, Crime Talk aficionados. My name is Scott Reich, and this is Crime Talk. This is our Tuesday night live program. We haven't done it in a couple of weeks because I've had some scheduling issues, and there were some other things going on, which didn't think a whole lot of people were going to tune in and join us. What was that thing last week? Oh, I think it was the election. That's right. Anyway, we are here tonight, and obviously there's lots of things that have been happening. And the big thing that we're going to talk about tonight is obviously the Delphi murder case. That's right. Richard Allen found guilty, all 4 counts, murder and murder with kidnapping. Faces roughly 130 years in prison, which means he will die in prison unless his case gets reversed on appeal. And there may be some issues for appeal, and we can talk about that as well. Obviously, the big issue would be that the defense was basically, had their hands tied behind their back just to make it fair for the prosecutors, and they couldn't go into the alternate suspect theory of defense. So we'll talk about that. I mean, the jury deliberated, 18 hours, I think it ultimately was. So it's not like they made a rush to judgment. All right. For those who've never joined us before, my name is Scott Reich. I am a practicing criminal defense attorney, and we've been doing this little YouTube channel podcast for quite a while now, it seems like. I want to appreciate everyone that is joining us. And like I said, I'm a practicing criminal defense attorney. If it's actually happened in real life, well, I've probably represented somebody in that particular situation. Represented people and walked people on homicide cases. In fact, 8 not guilties on homicides as you walk people out the door. No lesser included offenses, no split the baby. I'm talking 8 not guilties walk out the door. So I kind of know what I'm talking about as it relates to what goes on in a homicide trial. All right. And I've probably got, haven't keep count, not even keeping track right now, but I think I've got 5 or 6 homicides going on right now between myself and another attorney here in the office. So like I said, kind of a resident expert, just saying, you may kind of know what's going on. I mean, not to disparage other people. There's lots of other people out there that you can go listen to, but how many of them have really done that much of it as much as we do? I'm just resident expert here, Scott Reich. Anyway, like I said, thanks for joining us. We know you can be doing lots of things, and hopefully you will enjoy the show. Now, we're going to do something that we normally do on our Tuesday night live program. We're going to give you the call-in number, the secret call-in number that normally we only give to our Patreon members, but I think there is enough interest in the Richard Allen case, obviously found guilty yesterday as it relates to the deaths of Liberty, Libby German, and Abigail Abby Williams, some 15 and 13 years old when they were killed. And I think we can say it now. Can't say allegedly killed by Richard Allen. The jury has spoken. So the question is, do you think the jury got it right? Or do you think that Richard Allen has been wrongfully accused and convicted? That is the question of the evening, ladies and gentlemen. Now, let's face it. 7 years from 2017, February of 2017, when the bodies are discovered, to now here we are in 2024. Allen doesn't get arrested until October of 2022. And it comes to find out that, some FBI contract worker had completely mislabeled his name on the file, had his name and the street that he lived on. And so it got misfiled. Okay. Now, I think there is plenty of criticism to go to the Indiana State Police that were conducting this investigation and the local police as well. But hey, the prosecutor pulled it all together, made his pitch, and said, hey, this is about Richard Allen is the bridge guy. We've got the bullet. And guess what? He confessed. So the question is, him Richard Allen being at the scene of the crime, that he puts himself there. He goes and talks to the police and says, hey, I was there about that time. No real follow-up, no nothing. And then they misfile and say, hey, let's go check out this Richard Allen guy. This is kind of interesting. Wow, he was there. Wow. How did we miss that? As they used to say in the military, ladies and gentlemen, failure to pay attention to detail demonstrates an inability to accept larger responsibility. So that clerk, I'm sure she got a promotion, right? Or she should have been fired immediately if she had not been already. That's the problem with the government, right? Nobody ever gets fired in the government. They promote them to get them out of there. They used to do that in the military, as I recall. Oh my God, the guy's a total dirtbag. How do we get rid of him? We can't. Let's promote him. You laugh, but it's true. It happens. Anyway, the clerk misfiles it. They ultimately go, interview him again. You did it, didn't you? And he's like, no, I didn't. I don't know what you're talking about. They get a search warrant for the house. They find the gun based upon the round that was apparently there between the bodies of Libby and Abby. And they say, hey, we brought in this tool mark expert from the Indiana State Police, and our expert concludes that it's the same little notches that you get on the bullet that was found, the unspent round that was found there, even though the defense obviously said, hey, this is a highly manufactured gun. There's going to be, there's similarities, but there'll always be some differences. I get it. But basically, the jury must have believed some of that. We don't have all of the information as to what was the deciding factor from the jury. I have not seen anything from a particular juror saying this was one convincing thing, but you have to think that it was a combination of all things. Now, obviously, there's a little bit of discrepancy as it relates to the bridge guy. Pretty common. Looks like a guy walking, in, early spring, I guess. It's still chilly out. He's got a hat on. He's got a coat. He's got pants. Could look like just about any guy walking in Indiana at that time of year on that particular bridge, right? Now, I don't know. The thing I thought was a little weird about his story, maybe it's just me, but he's got a wife, and I think his daughter still lived at home at the time, but he was going to go for a walk by himself out on the bridge. I don't know. I don't go for walks by myself. I would ask the lovely Miss Kristen, would you like to go for a walk and bring Miss Winnie the Bulldog? Now, I'm not saying it's not plausible. I mean, he obviously put himself there. He went to the police and said, hey, I was there. Consider me as a suspect, right? Well, maybe a little bit of an exaggeration, but they didn't talk to him. They missed it. Then we got the bullet thing. And then he gets arrested. Then they put him in the Department of Corrections. Now, you have to admit, that's a little unusual. Remember the magistrate that didn't want to be on this case? It was so, he recused himself, didn't want to be involved in the case at all. But he was the one, as I recall, that said, I'm going to move you to the Department of Corrections for your own safety. Now, that's a little unusual, and I'm not going to say that it doesn't happen all the time in Indiana. But never where I've practiced do we send somebody to the Department of Corrections, because that's where people go where they've actually been convicted. They put Richard Allen in basically solitary confinement for an extended period of time. He obviously has some mental health issues. He starts going into psychosis. I think at one point he was on Halidol. Now, I had a client that they said he was, not competent to proceed. I mean, it went on for like a year or so. Next thing you know, they pumped him full of Halidol, and he would say anything that anybody wanted. So that's my experience with Halidol. Now, I'm not saying that's what happened with Richard Allen. What I'm telling you is completely anecdotal, but I think that, it's something to be considered. So anyway, he starts calling his wife, calling his mom, telling his therapist, who has a deep interest in this case, I did it. I think I did it. Did I do it? I think I may have done it. I probably did it, right? They keep saying I did it, so I probably did it, right? And then he says he finds God and Jesus, and so he had to have done it. So, he's repenting, all that good stuff. Well, then his attorneys get a hold of this and said, whoa, pump the brakes. You guys have deteriorated this guy's mental ability to the point where he basically may not even be competent. He's just babbling gibberish, and you can't believe what he's saying on these phone calls. Now, maybe somebody sat in. Maybe somebody actually sat in and listened to these calls. Was it the ramblings of a madman? Now, obviously, we didn't get to see it. And I'm not sure what Indiana's policy is. Do we now get all the evidence that's going to be released since the case is over, or maybe after sentencing? I think we should. But if we had just been able to see and hear the evidence in this case, maybe there wouldn't be so many people that are either saying, hey, he's guilty. It's obvious. It's overwhelming evidence. Whereas many people are saying that he's innocent. He doesn't look a thing like the bridge guy. You can't say that gun is the only one who would have matched that bullet. It's a high production gun. Of course, the tool marks are going to be very similar. And how can you believe a word this man said when he was on Halidol, basically in a state of psychosis that everybody, some of the experts testified, even the state experts said he was in psychosis. It's just the lady that was really interested in it, saying, oh, he's very logical. He's telling all these things. And then, of course, the key piece of evidence, the van. He was going to do terrible things to Libby and Abby, but then he thought he got spooked because there was a van that drove by. The guy that was it, Mr. Is it Webster or Weber? I never remember his name. But anyway, and he's like, well, I was kind of driving by, or could have been driving by. That was 7 years ago. But whatever you guys need me to, say, I'll take a look at it, and we'll just go from there, right? So that comes down to the question: was that enough? Obviously, proof beyond a reasonable doubt, right? I have the jury instructions that the judge gave in this particular case. And, let's take a look at, let's take a look in this case. Burden rests on the prosecution. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt. This is the Indiana instruction. This was a final instruction. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt is proof that leaves you firmly convinced of the defendant's guilt. There are very few things in the world that we know which are absolutely certain. And in criminal cases, the law does not require proof that overcomes every possible doubt. All accurate statements of the law. It's based upon consideration of the evidence. Based upon the consideration of the evidence, you are firmly convinced that the defendant is guilty of the crimes charged, you may find him guilty. If, on the other hand, you think there is a real possibility that he is not guilty, you should give him the benefit of the doubt and find him not guilty. The burden is upon the state to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant is guilty of the crimes charged. It is a strict and heavy burden. The evidence must overcome any reasonable doubt concerning the defendant's guilt, but it does not mean that a defendant's guilt must be proved beyond all possible doubt. A reasonable doubt is a fair, actual, and logical doubt based upon reason and common sense. A reasonable doubt may arise either from the evidence or the lack of evidence. Reasonable doubt exists when you are not firmly convinced of the defendant's guilt after you have weighed and considered all the evidence. The defendant must not be convicted on suspicion or speculation. It is not enough for the state to show that the defendant is probably guilty. The state must prove each element of the crimes by evidence that firmly convinces each of you and leaves no reasonable doubt. The proof must be so convincing that you can rely and act upon it in the matter of the highest importance. The rule of law requires proof of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, applies to each juror individually. Each of you must refuse to vote for conviction unless you are convinced beyond a reasonable doubt of the defendant's guilt, and your verdict must be unanimous. Now, obviously, the instruction continues here, and it says, under the law of the state, a person charged with a crime is presumed to be innocent. And this presumption of innocence continues in favor of the defendant throughout each stage of the trial, and you should fit the evidence presented to the presumption that the defendant is innocent if you can reasonably do so. If the evidence lends itself to two reasonable interpretations, you must choose the interpretation consistent with the defendant's innocence. If there is only one reasonable interpretation, you must accept that interpretation and consider the evidence with all the other evidence in this case in making your decision. The defendant has not been required to present any evidence to prove his innocence or to prove or explain anything. The fact that the charges have been filed, the defendant arrested and brought to trial, is not to be considered by you as any evidence of guilt. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, the jury, let's talk about it here. Do you think that there were two reasonable interpretations? Bridge guy, not bridge guy. Psychosis, can't believe the statement. Not psychosis, pure confession. So basically, the jury, after 18 hours of consideration of the testimony, said there was only one reasonable interpretation, and that was that Richard Allen was guilty. He did it. He killed Abby, he killed Libby, and even though the defense attorneys did not get to present their evidence as it related to the alternate suspect theory that they wanted to do. Now, I read to you, and one night we were here for quite a while, and we read their motion for a Franks hearing, basically saying that the police officers left out so much information that there never should have been probable cause for Richard Allen to be arrested. And it basically said, hey, it's impossible for this murder to have been, the scene, everything taking place within that time. It's just impossible for just one person to have committed the crime. Now, the prosecution has said in the past, that there may be more than one person involved. They just haven't been able to arrest anybody and charge them and bring them to court. Only Richard Allen. I mean, if I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, haven't there been people that have actually confessed to doing this? We had that child predator guy that was, texting with her beforehand, but obviously he was since in custody and they proved it wasn't him. We had neighbors that, there was a guy that died and all that stuff. I mean, the defense really had their hands tied. But I'll be honest with you, regardless of the alternate suspects, in my humble opinion, I think the thing that hurt him was the confessions. I have said this before, and I will say it again, and I mean it when I say it. It is always the defendant's own words that get them in the end. And when I said in the intro, eight not guilties on first-degree murders, walking out the door, no lesser included offenses, that kind of stuff, the key theme of nearly every one of those cases, other than a self-defense case, they kept their mouth shut. They kept their mouth shut. And I always tell new clients, listen, man, I know you're going to be sitting here in custody and you all are going to sit around and your attorneys are going to tell you to not say a word. Don't talk on the phone about your case. Don't talk to your cellie about it. Those guy will sell you out for a cup of ramen noodles. Okay. And of course, the guy's in custody. He doesn't listen to you. What do you know? You've only been doing this for 30 years. You're an idiot. Why is he telling me that? Nothing bad is going to happen to me. And then sure enough, there you go. They start talking. And then it's on the telephone talking about everything about the case. And anything that the defendant says comes in as an admission as a party opponent, as long as it's relevant to the case. And if it can be taken out of context, misconstrued, it will be by the prosecution. It really will be. But as in Richard Allen's case, when he's on the phone, and they got prisoners watching him and recording him, and the phone calls For the love of God, seriously, and I mean this seriously, ladies and gentlemen, how stupid can you have to be? Your attorneys tell you, don't talk about the facts of the case on the phone. It's all recorded. They even warn you on the phone calls, right? I mean, how we've talked about this before. The cops give a Miranda warning, right? It was judge-made law that says if you're in custody and you're going to be interrogated, you're going to be advised of your Miranda rights, right? Arizona v. Miranda, we're going to advise you. And it basically says, hey, idiot defendant, we know you're a fool, but we're going to go above and beyond this, and we're going to tell you, shut your freaking mouth. You are in custody. They're interrogating you. And us judges have come up with this thing, and we're going to warn you about it and say, any statement you make can and will be used against you in a court of law. And we're going to warn you once again because we think you're such a moron, or you think you're smarter than everybody else. We're even going to tell you you're entitled to a lawyer. So all you have to do is say the magic words. Frank, can you cue up the magic words? Okay. How do you know what the magic words are, ladies and gentlemen? When they advise you of your Miranda rights, you do this. Roll, Frank.
You, get up. Yeah, you.
All right, lawyer. Lawyer. Lawyer.
How much more clear could it possibly be, ladies and gentlemen? Lawyer, lawyer, lawyer. Clear, unequivocal invocation of your right to counsel. So they created Miranda advisements to warn people, and they still talk. Talk, 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 talk. All they do is talk. I talk to clients, come to the office. Okay, did you make any statements upon your arrest? No, I didn't say anything. Okay, did you talk to the detectives at all? Well, yeah, I talked to them. For a minute. Oh, really? Well, how long was that minute? Oh, I don't know. It probably wasn't more than like 45 minutes. What were you talking with them about? Oh, I didn't say anything. I was just trying to figure out what was going on, because I was curious and I didn't know why I was being looked at. So I felt I had to talk with them to do that. And of course, you get the audio recording, the tape, and of course, they put themselves at the scene of the crime, all that good stuff. So Richard Allen's case, jumping back to that, for the love of God, they actually warn you every time you dial out of a correctional facility, this call is being recorded in a very nice voice. I don't know. Maybe they need to use like a drill instructor voice or something like that. I don't know. But it's a nice voice. This call is being monitored and recorded. They warn you. And yet people do it. And then you always get the case, particularly in a homicide case, you always get the phone calls from the jail. And oftentimes that just clinches the case for the prosecution because people start calling, they start talking, and they start telling them what they did or didn't do, or I didn't do this, or, hey, will you get rid of this as well? And it just makes the case. Happens all the time, but nobody ever listens to the attorney, right? Now, let's be fair. The attorneys for Richard Allen, given the restrictions that they had to work under, I believe they did an incredible job. Okay. I'm sure I've been there. They were in that trial psychosis. All right. So they're going into trial. You have to remember, trial psychosis of a criminal defense lawyer. It sounds something like this. All right. So let me get this straight. My client is accused of killing 2 local girls that everybody loves. Everybody wants this case solved. Everybody's up in arms. Good thing the police got to our guy before the public did. Otherwise, they probably would have hung him from the highest tree. But that's okay. That's all right. We've got some physical evidence, no DNA or anything like that. And we have 61 alleged confessions. And the criminal defense attorney saying, I got this. I can show that there is reasonable doubt that the physical evidence is non-scientific, shouldn't be trusted. The confessions are a result of this coercion, this torturing, if you would, of Richard Allen, putting him in isolation, basically trying to break him. And sure, he put himself there at the crime scene at about the time of the crime scene. And maybe he allegedly knows a certain fact or two that he told his therapist, Dr. Hala, I think was her name, that nobody else really kind of knew about. So we really looked into that. So yeah, there you go. Is that all you got? That's what the defense attorney was saying. Is that all you have? We got this. Okay. His attorneys did a really good job considering the uphill battle. Oh, and not to mention, the judge ruled against them, I think, on just about every possible motion that they filed, with the exception of the dress out order. Okay. So that you can have civilian clothes at court. You have to have an order from the judge telling the sheriff that they can dress him out. So there you go. Right. I've been there, done that. They did a pretty darn good job. But at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, at the end of the day, the jury believed the prosecution. The jury believed the prosecution in this particular case. So let's see, by show of hands, let's see, raise your hands. Who thinks the jury got it correct? Raise your hand, right? Now, who thinks the jury got it wrong? Show of hands, right? All right, now what we're going to do, ladies and gentlemen, something we don't normally do. We usually save this for being a Patreon member. And we'll do our Patreon show afterwards as well. But this is, if you want to be a Patreon member, this is kind of the stuff you get into. We're going to put up the secret Crime Talk Batline call-in number. All right. Now, you only got one rule. You can talk about anything you want. Okay. Tonight, hopefully it's about this subject. And I want to know what you think the jury, did they get it correct? I want to know what you think as to whether the jury got it correct. And what piece of evidence do you think that they relied upon to come to that ultimate conclusion? And if you think the jury got it wrong, I want to know why you think you did it wrong. One rule, though. All right. I understand you're probably watching on a computer or phone, but you got to talk into the phone and turn your voice down. Otherwise, there's a delay and it gets really awkward. So those are the only rules. Okay. So let's do this. Frank, who do we have on the first call? Nancy. Where are you calling from?
An hour and a half from Delphi.
Nancy, an hour and a half from Delphi. All right. Fabulous.
Yeah.
So are you still in the great state of Indiana, or are you somewhere outside of Indiana?
No, I am in Indiana. I live here now, but I'm from the Philadelphia area.
Okay. Well, have you been following this case with the people, the state of Indiana versus Richard Allen?
Yes, sir. I visited Delphi, the bridge, etc. this past summer.
Okay.
It gives you goosebumps when you go there. You taught us well. I was convinced Richard Allen was bridge guy based on his wife's Facebook post with his picture in the car at Christmas at the mall wearing the same damn jacket. And I said, oh my God, that's him. However, I said, no, let me take a step back and I will pause, etc. And I was vacillating back and forth. I was nervous watching or listening to all the evidence during the trials, all the YouTube channels, and the right verdict was reached. And I think that the evidence was what the jury asked for in the last days of the recording of Libby's video and his interrogation to somewhat seal the deal in terms of his voice and just reassure themselves that while it might have been circumstantial in many cases, that there really wasn't any doubt given confessions. He said he was there. He had his clothes that he said he was wearing. the psychosis might have been true in the long run, but he wasn't that crazy to begin with, and then he turned crazy suddenly. And I'm curious from your perspective, Scott. I don't think I've ever heard your not prediction, but what you thought might happen. I gave you my thoughts. Now I'm really curious for your thoughts and what you think happened or what you thought might happen.
Well, first of all, I appreciate your analysis. I think you've obviously thought it through, and you were willing to give Richard Allen the presumption of innocence, and let's see how things worked out. Early on, I was very, very skeptical that it was in fact Richard Allen as the bridge guy. I mean, that could look like any middle-aged guy on a Saturday afternoon wearing blue jeans and a coat and a hat. Where I said, I think he, and you can go back and look at my videos. I said, I think they've really got some problems here was when they started talking about all these confessions coming out. I'm telling you, juries, from my experience, juries do not like it. Well, I guess they do like it, but they don't like it when you say, don't believe my client's confessions, unless you can show he was literally tied with his hands behind his back and lifted up with his arms, in some sort of weird concoction like you see in some third world country where they're torturing somebody. I think most jurors are of the mindset that, well, why would you say that if you didn't do it? It's just common sense. You don't go around saying I killed somebody if you didn't do it. That's a pretty big no-no. And so, now listening to the evidence, there was some good stuff that came out as it relates to maybe he was on Halidol. Like I said, I explained my experience, client on Halidol. But the jury, just like the state trooper who said he listened to, I think, 700 phone calls. And I get it. I know he's been in custody a long time, and you're in isolation. You don't have contact with anybody, right? But like, you couldn't go without making 700 freaking phone calls. Like, are you kidding me? Like, and maybe I'm dating myself here, but I remember when I went to, boot camp, you leave home, they give you like the 5-second phone call to say, Mom, Dad, I've arrived safely. And that was the last. You didn't call them every weekend. I don't think you even got a chance. Maybe you got a letter or something. You couldn't have written a letter. Dear Mom, this is terrible. I'm being wrongfully accused of a crime. I put it in writing, for God's sakes. So I think what happened was the jury said, man, this guy's listened to 700 phone calls, and we'll never know until the jury actually speaks. But I've listened to 700 phone calls. He's probably listened to that recording, Go Down the Hill, how many times? Right? Probably hundreds, if not thousands of times, right?
Yep.
And it's just like, if you talk to a family member or a friend, as soon as you pick up that phone and they start talking, they don't have to introduce themselves. You know who it is. And my guess is the jury listened to that Down the Hill recording, all the different versions they came up with, right? I think there was enhanced and a not enhanced version. And they got to listen to those phone calls. They got to hear it. I mean, you don't need to be, some trained expert and saying that's not the same guy.
Yeah.
Now, I did see something. We did something in a case years and years ago. And I'm kind of curious why they didn't do it, or maybe they did and they didn't get the result they were looking for. But we had a lady on a wiretap, and she's like, that's not my voice. And so we brought in this sound engineer. I think she was from New Jersey or something. And I don't remember her name, but they did a record. Like, they analyzed, here's the recording. Then they had our client, do the recording of that exact same thing that was being said. And this voice analysis, they were able to say that wasn't her. And ultimately the United States attorney was like, wow, that's pretty persuasive. We're going to dismiss against your client. Wrong client. They identified the wrong person. So I'm kind of curious that wasn't it. But I think the voice had to have been big. I really do. And then on top of that, the confessions. That's what I think that did it. And I was worried. Like I said, I thought their original theory, that the defense put forward, like this is impossible. They would have had to have, undress the one, do this all by doing this. And, it sounds like complete nonsense, right? Like there had to have been more people there.
Right.
And maybe there were, they just haven't got everybody yet. And maybe we'll never know. Maybe we'll never know.
Never know.
But
Maybe
the
we'll
jury
never know.
is convinced enough beyond a reasonable doubt. I read you the instructions. These are the actual instructions that I read to you that the jury would have got. And it defines it. And it says, hey, if you think there is basically any reasonable conclusion that weighs in favor of the defendant, you should give him that benefit of the doubt and find him not guilty. And the jury said, you know what? There is not a, second reasonable interpretation of what the evidence is here. And remember, a jury is the trier of fact, right? The judge is the trier of law, makes legal reasonings. The jury decides what happened. Did this take place?
Yeah.
Was it the defendant that committed the crime? So.
Yeah. And I tried, Scott, even with the quote unquote treatment of him. I think the defense did a really good job at pulling at my heartstrings. And I was really worried that somebody on the jury would take that to heart. And I had to put it aside and say, no, that was not solitary confinement. It was for his own protection. I had to go with common sense versus my heart.
Yeah.
And I was really worried about the jury thinking that way as well.
Yeah. Now, here's my thinking, though. I think if I had been on that jury, I think there were enough reasonable interpretations that could have taken place, right? If the evidence lends itself to two reasonable interpretations, you must choose the interpretation consistent with the defendant's innocence. That was the jury instruction, right? I think if I was sitting on that jury, based upon everything I know, I think I would have said, probably did it, but not guilty, because I just don't think it rose to the level of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. That would have been basically my conclusion was, you know what? I get it. There's a lot of stuff. The confession's bad, but I think the defense, in my opinion, I thought they did a really good job with what they had to work with. And I think that they would have raised reasonable doubt. But listen, 12 people who are sequestered, listening to all this evidence, right? It depends on the personalities on the jury.
Yes.
But
well,
I was thinking
in that area of Indiana.
Yep. And I was thinking that it was going to be, we think he probably did it. He sure looks like the bridge guy. The voice could be the bridge guy.
Yeah.
But, those confessions, I just don't know. The circumstances around it. I mean, if you got 12 different people, it could have been a completely different result. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not criticizing the jury's decision in this particular case. I respect the jury of the decision because they made their decision based upon the evidence they had or the lack thereof. And they all concluded that the evidence did not lend itself to two reasonable interpretations, because had it, they would have been instructed according to the law, the judge's own instructions, that they should have said not guilty. And like I said, I thought the defense, they gave it a run for it. And I thought, they're probably thinking, you know what? That bastard probably did it. But I'm just not convinced beyond a reasonable doubt.
100%. I agree with you fundamentally. It was so touch and go for me that I begged my husband to report one of my best friend's husbands who looked exactly like the sketch with the goatee, because 80% of the Indiana men from this particular area, being from Philadelphia, not from this area, they look like that, they dress like that, and it sounds so stereotypical to say that. But I could point to 10 of my neighbors that it could have been.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's fascinating, really, culturally.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you so much for your call.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
All right. Bye.
All right. So before we go to the next call, I mean, there you have it. I mean, and I saw one of the things, of course, the defense attorney thinking the defense did a good job. I think they did. They did a good job with what they had to work with, but it wasn't enough. And like I said, I'm not criticizing the prosecution. I'm not criticizing the defense. The jury made the decisions, right? And that's the thing about trials, right? There's always going to be an unhappy person. One side's going to win and one side's going to lose. There's no winners when you go to court. There's no, everyone's going to leave together singing Kumbaya. It doesn't work that way. And the judge has to make a decision and the jury has to make a decision. And they're the ones that have to live with the decision they make, right? There's no real do-overs, unless, of course, we're talking the Karen Reed case, which we're not talking about tonight. But, maybe there will be a do-over. But, if you say, I'm convinced beyond a reasonable doubt, there's this, they are so firmly convinced of somebody's guilt, then that's it. So, like I said, Richard Allen, he did everything wrong. That's for sure. If he's, I don't believe in coincidences. He just happened to be there randomly that day, just randomly happened to have a gun there that day, right? A gun cycle, the round, unspent round, matched his gun, right? If you believe that evidence as such. And, the confessions, I'm telling you, the confessions, I'm telling you, that is the worst thing you have as a defense attorney. It's coming out of your own client's mouth. Why is he lying? Well, unless you can show that they promised him something or there was some coercion, other than that, it's really tough. People are going to say, but he confessed, right? He confessed to murder. And everyone thinks, well, it wasn't to the police. No, anything you say comes in. It's an admission by a party opponent. It is not hearsay, ladies and gentlemen. All right, next call, Frank. Pat, are you there?
Yes.
How are you, Pat?
I sure am. Thank you, Scott.
Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Madison, Indiana. It's also just an hour and a half or so from Delphi, and I'm an Indiana native.
Well, that is amazing. That's great. We've had 2 Indiana calls. Tell me what's on your mind. What are you thinking?
Well, it was heartbreaking, and we all lived with it in Indiana for 7 years.
Absolutely. And 2 young girls having their lives taken from them. That's terrible. That's tragic everywhere, isn't it?
It is. And Indiana is a small community in itself, but there were 2 things in the trial that left me personally without doubt.
Okay.
The first was the white van and the testimony about it.
Okay.
The second was his confession to his mother. As a mom and a grandma, that hit home with me when he told her, I wouldn't say it if it wasn't true. And I think very few people, and he doesn't seem like a completely cold-hearted man. I'm sure he had good qualities. He was a loving husband and father, but to tell your mama that you wouldn't say it if it wasn't true just hit me right in the gut.
Pat, I hear exactly what you're saying. I mean, that's the problem with the confessions. It's to his wife. It's to his mom. Mom, I did it. Don't talk like that. Right? Even mom knew, don't talk like that. Shut up. This is being recorded. But that's a good point. I mean, we're talking about a son to his mom saying, Mom, I did something. I did it. Not good fact, right? Do you have kids?
I have children, male and female. I have 7 grandchildren that are basically grown.
Okay.
And not blessed with any great grandbabies, although I complain about that often.
Well, maybe
but
soon.
As a parent, I had a stepson that had a lot of troubles, and he would confess to me his issues from afar. He was in California. And so I know that on a personal level with him, that he was truthful with me because he needed my reassurance, I believe, that I would love him no matter what.
Yep. Yeah.
So that's just from a mama and an old grandma's point of view.
Well, but you see, Pat, this is the kind of thing that I find the dynamics of a jury, right? Jurors are told, hey, you don't leave your common sense at the door when you become a jury. Sure, you got to follow the evidence, right? You got to follow the jury instructions that the judge gives you, but you still have to use your common sense. And I would guarantee you there were probably jurors in there that had the exact same reaction. He confessed to his wife and he confessed to his mother. Like, you don't go telling mom you did something bad unless you mean it, right? Or you're looking for some sort of reassurance. Are you still going to love me down the road? Reasonable conclusion that one could make from those statements, Pat. I think you nailed it.
Thank you, Scott. And I love your show. I've been watching for years.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks for calling in. I appreciate it. Do you like the format where we let people call in, where you just don't have to be a Patreon member to do that? Should we do it again?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I love it. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for calling in. I appreciate it. Thanks, Pat. See,
Thank
ladies
you, sir, for your time.
All right. Thank you. See, ladies and gentlemen, that's what juries do. They don't leave their common sense there, right? Just like Pat was describing. I've got kids. I had a kid myself that was in trouble, and he would tell me these things, right? And that rang true to her. That was her life experience. Jurors don't completely check their life experience at the door and say, I must only look at this. You do not abandon your reason and common sense when you become a juror. And like I said, the jury's made their decision. Whether you like it or not, you have to respect the decision. You got 12 people realizing the seriousness of this case, the penalty to be imposed, and they were able to come to that decision. Think about it, ladies and gentlemen. 12 people agreeing on something. Next time you have 12 people together, ask them where they all want to go have lunch or dinner. You're going to get 12 or 14 different answers. And to get everybody to agree, I want Italian food. No, how about we do Mexican? No, let's just do an American burger. Oh, I got that. I can't eat that, right? So you get all these people randomly brought together, all their votes equal, regardless of their education, life experience. They all have the same weight back there, and they all must agree. And they took 18 hours to deliberate, but I guarantee you they were thinking about it probably constantly since they were sequestered in their hotel room at night thinking about it. Oh, gee, I don't know. Anyway, next call, Frank. Who do we got? Larry, where are you calling from?
Lafayette, Indiana.
Wow. All right. The trifecta. We've gotten 3 calls from Indiana tonight. This is great. This is what I love about the internet, YouTube, this channel. Let's go to the resident experts. What are your thoughts from Lafayette, Indiana?
I'd like to preface this with I'm within 20 miles of Delphi. The lady from Madison, I agreed with her 100%, but she is 3 hours away from Delphi.
Okay.
And also, I personally know some of those people that were interviewed and testified.
Really? Who?
The thing that I had to agree with more than anything else was when he confessed to Dr. Walla.
Okay. Yeah.
He told her from the beginning to the end exactly what happened, and in his confession, that's when the van was mentioned. But he said much more than that he'd taken them down the hill, and before the van came, he was prepared to rape them. And at that time, it's my belief that the clothes were already off of Libby and Abby. Now, as far as the unspent round, it was from a certified Indiana State Police crime lab.
Yep.
and other people that testified were not associated with a certified crime lab.
Yeah,
It was their opinion,
Mhm.
but they did not have the credentials that the Indiana Crime Lab had.
Okay, I will give you that, but I'm not a big fan of all those certifications. They're kind of, if they pay their dues, they oftentimes get their certification. But I understand what you're saying. The defense expert, his lab was not certified, so I get it. Go ahead.
Well, the three things, when they interviewed all these people, the girls on the bridge, Saul, bridge guy, and the other people, they had various opinions of what he looked like and what he was wearing.
Yep.
But
which is not unusual when you have identifications from different people. It's very common
Exactly.
to have very different descriptions.
But when they were showed the picture of the bridge guy, every one of them said that is him.
Yep. And that's
So those three things that swayed me were just what I expressed with you. And, I used to, in my job, I'm retired now, but I was in Delphi twice a week. And I shop up there at grocery store where Rich Allen met the conservation officer.
Yeah.
I go up there once a month to shop there because they have certain items there that I enjoy.
Sure.
And so I'm quite familiar with the Delphi area and several of the people that were questioned, and I trust their being reputable people.
Yes.
And I agree with what the jury came to the conclusion of. Of course, before they came to the conclusion, I already had my opinion, but I was and am willing to accept whatever opinion that they came up with.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. Clearly you have thought about this, and, like you said, the identification, I think is, there were lots of different descriptions, but when they're like, hey, is this bridge guy? Yep, that's the guy I saw. And sure, think about it. People would give, there's scientific studies where, like people are in a classroom and somebody will walk by or run by, and then they'll ask, all right, describe that person. And then, if there's 30 people in there, you're going to get at least 25 different descriptions of what people said about the hair, the color, the, height, things like that. People just have different sense of judgment. But when you have a picture in this particular case and say, does it kind of look like this? Yeah, kind of looks like that. It starts to become a little more convincing that that's the same person that was kind of freaking them out a little bit, that they saw right there about that time. So let me ask you this, Larry. You said that people, and I'm not going to go into who I guess, for your own privacy and theirs. But it's not like these individuals had any particular, dog in the fight to convict Richard Allen because he had wronged them in any way. They were just like, I was there. This is what I saw. This is what I didn't see. Right. These people, as far as very credible.
Yes, quite credible. And I will tell you that one of the persons involved in this, I used to work with him. And the girls were found on his property, and you know who I'm talking about, Ron Logan.
Yep.
And I have been to his farm. I have been to his house. And then several of the other people that were on the trail that testified, I didn't personally know them like I did Ron Allen, but I had talked to them before. I'd even talked to the conservation officer when I was fishing one time. He came and asked me for my fishing license. So I had a brief conversation with him.
Sure.
And now there's one other thing I'd like to say. A lot of people says, well, what Rich was wearing Everybody in Indiana looks like that. Well, that's a bunch of BS.
All right, tell me
you
why.
something.
I mean, I was going to say, hey, it looks like every average middle-aged white guy on a weekend, right? Throwing a jacket and a pair of blue jeans.
Says, but I'm here in person to tell you that's not true.
All right, tell me more.
Well, as a matter of fact, I have short hair. I never wear a Carhartt jacket like that, and I rarely wear blue jeans.
All right.
And I pick out 20 people in the Delphi area that I know. You may have 3 people out of 20 that dress that way.
Okay. All right.
Well,
let me ask you this. You obviously live
Sure.
very close to Delphi. You shop there, you go there, you know a lot of these people. When Richard Allen was arrested, did anybody say, I thought that guy looked like the bridge guy? Or were they just surprised that the guy was living, just in his normal life?
Nobody that I talked to said that they suspected him. Some of them knew him from the pharmacy, and some of them did not. But nobody that I talked to said, oh, yeah, we thought in the very beginning it was him. No, Not one person that I talked to said that.
Interesting. What did the local community think before Richard Allen was arrested? What was the scuttlebutt? What were people saying out there that, who may have done it? What about all this odinous stuff?
Number one was when the FBI got the search warrants on Ron Logan's property,
mm-hmm.
and, he made an excuse that was not true.
His alibi.
They automatically suspected he was the guy.
Sure.
But later, I know the guy, and I know he was arrested for driving under the influence more than once. And, he was within 1 month of getting his driver's license back. But it is not the first time that he's driven.
Oh.
And after he left the trash dump, before he came to Lafayette to the fish store, which he's got proof of that by the receipt. That's true. They found that in his home. But what isn't said, and the investigators only said what they could prove.
Sure.
They know a lot more, but proving it is one thing and saying it is a different thing.
Yep.
But on the way to Lafayette to the store, he stopped at a tavern and played some cards and drank some beer.
Yep.
Now that's hearsay.
Sure.
I'm saying the investigators know more, and they know about, when he confessed to Dr. Walla, he told about touching his sister and his daughter.
Yep. Now they came and testified that nothing happened.
They can't prove that, but he said motive there that they believe that he has done certain things before.
Sure.
But they cannot prove it. And when his sister and daughter testified, they said, no, it wasn't true.
Correct. Well, let me ask you this, Larry.
Anyway,
since you're there, I got this.
Any other questions you have? But
I got one.
Well,
I got
okay.
one. Is there a large Odinist following there in Indiana? I had never heard of this until this case came about. Is it something that really goes on there? Do you have these people that worship the Norse gods or whatever they do? Is it an unspoken truth?
I've never heard of that before this incident. But now I will tell you this. We have a lot of crazy, prejudiced people. And, back in the day, Indiana had more Ku Klux Klan than Alabama or Mississippi did.
Sure.
We even had a governor of Indiana back in the 1800s that was a Ku Klux Klan member.
We had a mayor
So we
here.
have a lot of prejudices against people. But to answer your question, I'd never heard anybody ever mention anything about this here Odinist. I've never heard of it before.
Oh, and neither had I. But you read some of the defense filings. You think
I was working and getting around. I mean, I talked to a lot of people, and in my time, I personally never heard of any Odinist religions.
Okay. Well, that's interesting because I had never heard of it myself, but you would think based upon some of the defense filings that everybody was some sort of Odinist and they all come out to, do these sacrifices or something like that. So it's good to know Indiana is Odinist, just about Odinist free. So that is good to hear. Well, it sounds like you followed this case very, very closely. The fact that you live so close, some of the people involved, and it sounds like, you would have lived with the result that the jury would have rendered in any case, whether guilty or not guilty. But in this case, it sounds like you think the jury made the correct decision. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, that's exactly the way I feel. And one of the reasons why I followed this case was, I had 2 daughters myself, and I can't picture my daughters going through what Libby and Abby had to go through. I mean, I can't fathom it.
Yeah.
And I wanted the jury and the investigators, and even like you said, the defense did a wonderful job with what they had to work with. But
they did.
I wanted to find out who really did this, and I am satisfied now that the people in the Delphi area and even where I live, we can rest easy now that they have convicted somebody. And of course, it can go on appeal or whatever. I'm going to accept whatever happens because I believe in the justice system in our country and in our state of Indiana. Our justice system here is a little bit different than from where you live, and you've noticed certain things that Judge Gull has done that probably in your jurisdictions, it wouldn't go that way. But this is Indiana, and we're a small state, and we have certain rules that other people don't have to go by.
No, I agree with you. I think there are a couple of, things in a couple of the rulings, even the jury instructions, they hit everything that's required. That's for sure. But usually they're much thicker. I got a trial going in federal court, and our jury instructions on that case are just about as thick as this. And this is a multiple homicide case. So, hey, each state gets to do it themselves. I've, done trials mostly in federal court in other states, but the reality of it is they got the rules. Those are the rules of the game to play by. And if there were some sort of legal errors, I'm sure the defense, who's not been shy about challenging Judge Gull, will say that she erred in the trial at the appellate courts. They were right a couple of times, right? I mean, the Supreme Court reversed her and said, give him his previous attorneys back. So we will have to wait and see, but I really appreciate your call. There's one thing I love about, almost citizen journalism here, right? Let's talk to the people that are there. Well, let me ask you one final question, Larry, while I got you. It just came to me. What is the general atmosphere there in Delphi? Like, is it sense of relief, sense of, is there somebody else out there, or, justice is done? What's the feeling?
In my opinion, the actual people around Delphi, most of them believe that they've got the right man. But there's a lot of people from outside of the area that doesn't agree with that. But, just in any case like this, 50% of the people are going to agree and 50% of the people aren't going to disagree. But we have to put our trust in this jury, and that jury is not from Delphi, Indiana. They're from northern Indiana at Fort Wayne, Indiana. So they're about as unprejudiced as you can be, but I think everybody has a certain amount of prejudice when it comes to these sort of things.
Well,
But,
anytime, young teenagers or children die, that's always, a very difficult case. I do think the judge made the right decision in, bringing the jury. I kind of like the idea of, bringing the jury back to the jurisdiction where it was so the people can see it and watch it. I like that. Like you said, there's always going to be 50-50. Some people agree, disagree on something like this, which is another reason why I wish Judge Gull would have allowed the trial to be streamed live so people can see that. There's been so many cases where, whether it was the George Floyd trial, the Rittenhouse trial, where people thought, oh my gosh, the city's going to burn. And neither case did it. Why? Because people were able to see it. They could see all of the evidence that the jury made their decision in those particular cases. And they're like, yeah, I can see how they came to that decision. I get it. So that was the only thing, I wish the judge, not the only thing, I think she made a couple of errors, but she's the judge. She has to make a decision. And, but I wish she had streamed it. And that way the world could have seen all the witnesses and everybody could have judged the credibility and seen it for themselves, just like the jury got to see it. And like I said, I don't hold the jury, in, any negative light whatsoever. They made the decision that they had and they all agreed. And so we got to respect it and only disrespect it, so to speak, but you have to honor it unless and until the appellate court said, nope, the judge made a mistake, not a fair trial, and get a do-over. And we'll just have to wait and see.
Remember that Judge Gull was appointed.
Correct.
She didn't choose this case. She was appointed.
Yep.
And I don't know whether the Supreme Court of Indiana chose her or who. I don't know who did that. But I will tell you this. Before she was appointed the judge in this case, she was highly ranked to be one of the appointees on the Indiana Supreme Court. Did you know that?
I knew that she had a very good reputation, held in high regard. I think she was kind of like the chief judge up there in Fort Wayne, if I remember correctly. But if I'm wrong, please feel free to correct me. But
you're correct.
I think that she had a very good reputation. And I do believe, I don't know if it was like the Supreme Court. That's normally what happens. The Supreme Court appoints a judge if the judge gets off or they need to change a venue or something. So, somebody had to figure, we've got X number of judges. Who do we think can handle this? It's going to be high profile. We need somebody who's going to be able to handle strong personalities from the prosecution, the defense, the defendant, the media, all that good stuff. So, I think she's made, I don't disagree with all. Listen, just because I don't agree with the judge's decision doesn't mean they're not a good judge. I've had disagreements with judges for 30 years. And I get along with, probably 99.9% of them. She was, like any judge, you have to assume that she's doing the best job that she can and, wants to make the right decision. She doesn't want to be, reversed on appeal. So you have to assume that she's doing the best that she can. So, sir,
yes.
I appreciate your call. Thank you so much.
And one other thing, if I may.
Yes, sir.
She is a no-nonsense judge. And when she didn't allow these odious people to present their case, it was because they did not have a case. There was no facts that put any of them in the area whatsoever. So I think she's a no-nonsense judge, and a lot of people don't like her because of that. But I have to respect her position, and that's the end of my story. But thank you. I listen to your program quite often, and I agree with you a lot of times, and there's a couple times when I don't agree with you. But, I recognize that I am not right 100% of the time, and most people are not 100% right every time. And we have to accept that.
I totally agree with you. I appreciate you watching, and even when you disagree with me, that makes it even better because at least you keep coming back. So maybe it at least made everybody think a little bit, right?
Yes. Thank you, counselor. I really appreciate you giving people the opportunity to voice their opinion.
All right. Well, thank you, sir, and be safe. All right. Thanks for calling.
Bye.
All right, Frank, who do we have next?
We have Victor.
Victor, where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Victor, Toledo, Ohio.
All right. What's on your mind?
What's on my mind? Okay. Yeah, I do have a connection to Peru, Indiana. My mother is from there. Yeah, is there a possibility this guy had some issues, it sounds like, before this event happened on the Monon High Bridge? Is it possible he called in and he wasn't even there?
You're referring to Richard Allen as far as
Yes,
when he went down
Richard Allen.
When he went down and self-reported himself in the vicinity?
Yeah, he self-reported himself.
Yeah.
I mean, could that be possible?
Well, that he wasn't there? I mean, you would.
Yeah.
I mean,
he wasn't there. He self-reported himself because he wanted to insert himself into the situation just for notoriety or something.
I mean, I think, anything's possible, but I don't have anything to back that up. I think he thought he was
right. I don't either. I just thought that was a possibility. Now, the thing of it is, okay, they have witnesses that passed by bridge guy. And is there any consensus from these witnesses how tall the guy was?
Well, they had various descriptions of his height, but as Larry said, when they were shown in court, kind of the still image of the bridge guy, did this kind of meet the general description? And yeah, that could be the bridge guy, the guy that they saw. And the reality of it is the jury believes that was him. And one of the problems for the defense, obviously, was that, and good point for the prosecution, is that he puts himself at the scene of the crime, generally, right? At the same time, generally, that these girls were killed, or the prosecution believes that the girls were killed. There's some weird stuff, but sometimes it just doesn't resonate with a jury, or think, well, what's the big deal? The whole thing about the earbud jack, somebody plugged in earpods or headphones or something into the phone that was there, and the state didn't even know about it. Right? No big deal. I mean, I had a trial we did in March where I had an officer taking the phone home with her after she said she put it into evidence and took it home with her, and then took it to the experts the following day, even though she's saying it was in evidence. Sometimes it just doesn't resonate with the jury. Like, yeah, we just don't see the relevance. What should we be offended by that? And like I said, he put himself there. I think the confessions are what did him in. I really do. I don't put that much stock in the whole round, matching his gun. That's not it. But I think the problem was there's just too many alleged confessions. Too many confessions, as the jury's concluded. They're no longer alleged. So thank you for your call.
Well, thank you.
Super chat here. See, now we appreciate super chats, but we don't ask for them, right? Because we're bringing you this as a public service announcement, so to speak. Scott, how many times in your career have you seen someone go from no criminal history to this type of life-ending crime? Many, 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 many times. Many times. Usually, and I think could be backed my assertion here in this particular case, normally it comes with sex crimes. And if you believe the testimony here that Richard Allen was going to do sexual things with Libby and Abby, that would kind of make sense. Okay. And that is normally where you see it. Now, every now and then you get somebody, they kill their wife, heat of passion, something like that. Or, they just kill their wife, right? Kill their spouse. Not saying you get it, but that's usually where, no criminal history. One day he's, client's just like, I'm done with her. Boom. Right. But normally what it comes down to is sexual offenses. You got people with no criminal history, nothing to indicate that there's anything wrong, so to speak, with them. Nobody says, oh, yeah, that guy, he's always weird and creepy. Normally what it comes down to, I swear, my experience is sexual offenses. And here, you commit sexual offenses in the state of Colorado, you go to prison for the rest of your life. It is an indeterminate life sentence. What that means is the judge says, I'm going to give you 20 years. It means you could spend your entire life there, even after you've served 20 years, 25, 30 years. Okay. And that's normally what it is. It's just people have this thing. They like people, normally men. Like I've represented women that have done inappropriate things with underage, but it's normally men. And they go from, wife, 2 kids, happily married, but they've got this thing and they like to meet, young girls online or what they think are young girls online. And it just goes poorly from there, or they actually do it. Have court coming up in a couple of days. No prior history, no nothing. Next thing you know, going to go spend the next 24 years in prison. Happens all the time. So thanks for the super chat. Another super chat. Have you ever wondered if a judge was compromised? Not in state court. No. And frankly, not in federal court. Now, I have heard stories of this, right? I remember once I was a young attorney, had a client, and I don't remember where he was from, Louisiana, Mississippi or something. He was kind of like, well, who do we pay? And I'm like, what do you mean? Who do we pay? Well, can't we pay somebody, the judge, and this stuff goes away? I'm like, no, we don't do that. I don't know where how things are done where you are, but we don't do that here. And, you seem like a nice guy and all, but I'm not going to go ask around and lose my law license. Like, I was young attorney, but I was like, I know that's wrong. I'm like, no. And I still remember that client. He ultimately failed to appear, and I immediately moved to withdraw. Never heard from him again. But that I just don't see judges. You may not like the judge, but that doesn't mean they're doing anything nefarious. This case, Judge Gold clearly didn't like the defense attorneys, thought that they were basically incompetent. But, the reality of it is the Supreme Court fixed that and said, put your other attorneys on. And, the attorneys that were going to be on the case, they got kicked off. Would they have done a different job on this case? I don't know. I think they did. I think the defense did a good job. And you got to remember, the prosecution is supposed to win these type of cases. They're supposed to win these type of cases. So, the prosecution is supposed to win these cases because they are supposed to ethically believe they have enough evidence to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. If they do not believe they have that evidence, then they should dismiss the case. So there you go. I'm not familiar. I don't think I've ever met a crooked judge. I've met a couple that are complete idiots, but I've never met one that was crooked. And I mean that with all sincerity. There's some out there that are dumb as, a box of rocks. But I don't think I've ever met one and said, oh my God, the other side bought them off or they're compromised by one. No, that doesn't happen. There's some dumb ones. I'll give you that, but not crooked. No, I don't think so. Is there another call, Frank? Or is that it?
Yeah, we got one more.
All right, we got one more call. Who do we have? Barbara. Barbara, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Where are you calling from?
You think that you're California?
All right. What's on your mind?
Do you think the jury was really open? Everything they listened to?
I have to assume that they listened to all the evidence. They had nothing else going on for the 3 weeks that the trial took place. They had nowhere to go, nothing to do, no one to be other than a good juror. I have no reason to believe that they were not paying attention. I generally believe that most jurors look at jury service as something very important to do. It's usually one of the most important decisions that jurors will do in their life. They know and understand, particularly in a case like this, how important it is. And, if they deliberated 5 minutes, I'd say, wow, that must have been pretty overwhelming, or they just weren't listening, right? But 18 hours, I'm sure there was some debate. I'm sure that they went over evidence over and over. They looked at it. And people that had their doubts obviously had those doubts erased during that time period. So somebody says, well, why is a juror crying? Jurors cry all the time because they know it's a serious decision. But if they thought that they made the wrong decision, they should have spoken up when the jury was polled. So, yes, I do believe the jury was open-minded and listened to the evidence. So, thanks for your call.
Well, why didn't they listen to, there's no DNA of Richard?
Well, they heard that fact. You have to assume that they considered it. But, oftentimes when people are outside, DNA will be denigrated by the weather. Sometimes you'd expect to find DNA. Other times, you hope you find DNA. Sometimes there's no DNA. Sometimes you get mixtures of DNA. If there was DNA evidence on any of that, obviously he would have been cooked from the word go. It played out in his favor that there wasn't any DNA. But, there's nothing that says you're required to have DNA evidence. Juries have to make up their minds. And they could have said, wow, if there's only some DNA evidence, I'd be able to say guilty. But they said I could do that without it.
How come Weber has the same gun as Richard Allen?
Well, I've got lots of guns. I think I even have the same firearm as Richard Allen. It doesn't mean that I killed, Abby and Libby. That's when it comes to the defense attorneys. They got to raise that reasonable doubt when it comes to that kind of scientific evidence or the lack thereof. But to answer your first question, I think the jury took the matter seriously. I don't have any reason to doubt that. Now, if you present me with evidence that they blew it all off, they just ignored it, then I'll be more than happy to listen to that. But I haven't seen anything that would suggest that in any way.
I heard it from other YouTubers.
Well, a lot of people throw a lot of stuff out there on YouTube. And I said this before. We try to, it doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't matter what you believe. It only matters what you can prove, right? When I've seen prove by legal and competent evidence that could be admitted in court, speculation, conjecture, tinfoil hat type stuff. Don't get me wrong. I love a good conspiracy like the rest of everybody. It's great talking, gets lots of views, right? But I'm not going to go out on a limb on something that's ridiculous if I don't think I have a good faith basis for backing it up. That'll also get you sued. Thanks for your call. All right, super chat here. Have you ever had a client convicted when you know for certain that they were innocent? I have had, yes, clients over the years that I thought were innocent of the crimes charged. Now, fortunately, the ones that I truly, truly believed, things worked out in the end, so to speak. There was a reversal or something like that. I had, wasn't my client the first time through, but the second trial I did, and he was acquitted of that. And so, yes, sure, I've had clients that I thought were innocent. Sure. I mean, that happens to any defense attorney. I've also walked a lot of clients that, let's just say, they maybe weren't as pure as the driven snow. All right. And they've been acquitted, right? I remember walking out of an acquittal. I was just as proud as can be. Walk this innocent man. This is great. This is fabulous. Client literally is, I will never do that again. Just broke my heart. So, Thanks for the super chat. Yes, everyone has had a client that they thought were innocent or maybe got convicted of something you didn't think they necessarily did. But yes, it's, you just never know. You never know. It's a tough business, ladies and gentlemen. It's a tough business. Whether you're the prosecution, you're the defense attorney, you're the defendant, it takes a lot of guts for a defendant to go to trial. It really, really does. The risk of going to trial and losing is great. The punishment is usually greater if you go to trial and you lose. You're not going to get any mercy. You're going to get a trial tax normally from a judge. And it is what it is. I mean, it's just, it's a tough business. And, you see lots of people start out, young attorneys want to do criminal or doing the righteous. It's funny. I'm 55 and I'm like the old man in the courtroom these days. This job, this profession chews people up and spits them out. Okay. Not only because you're dealing with people that do terrible things to other human beings, and you see the viciousness and the horribleness of it, and you see good people lose their lives and, be injured and things like that. It's a tough business. A lot of people get out of it because you get crushed. You lose that trial. You think, oh my God, what should I have done differently? It's all up to me. It's all up to me. My client's innocent. He's going to lose his entire career. And then as you get a little bit older, you come to the realization, you know what? I did not create these facts that have brought us all here together. I will do what I can legally and ethically to do everything I can to represent this particular client. But not going to do anything unethical. It's going to get your law license revoked. Not anything that's going to get you sent to prison. You don't do that. And you see a lot of people. I know lots of attorneys that have over the years had drug and alcohol abuse because of the stress. It's a tough business. I mean, I'm sure these attorneys for Richard Allen, one, they're probably exhausted after 3 weeks of trial. I mean, I did that 4-week trial in March and God, it took me like 6 weeks to recover. It's just brutal. You're thinking about it all the time and then you get out of it and then you just got all this big stack of work to do. It is a tough business. But when you've done it as long as I have, you don't know what else you're going to go do. And frankly, it's kind of fun and it's interesting and it's never the same day twice. And, whether you're defending a client that's absolutely innocent or completely guilty or wrongfully accused, wrongfully accused or guilty of sin used to be my marketing. Either way, you're defending not necessarily the individual, you're defending the Constitution. You're defending the constitutional rights of that individual, because if you allow the government to railroad a guilty person, well, they're going to start doing it to innocent people as well. And the fact that Richard Allen, if you think that this is an appropriate verdict or you think that it is a crappy verdict, thank goodness he had competent defense attorneys that made the government crawl over glass to get there, that made the judge work. Because if the appellate courts affirm it, they're going to say he had great attorneys and therefore there's going to be no post-conviction relief because of that. Okay. And obviously, if you think the wrong result was had by the jury, then hopefully the appellate courts are going to say that his great attorneys were not able to get a fair trial and they get to do it all over again. So it just shows you how important those defense attorneys are, right? They're defending the Constitution. Everything in those jury instructions, those basic fundamental principles come from the Constitution, ladies and gentlemen. Criminal law is based upon the Bill of Rights. It really is. So at the end of the show, when I say the Constitution matters, it does. Whether you're the prosecution or the defense, you got to follow the rules. Those are the rules. All right. We went long tonight. I hope you enjoyed the show. Just saw another super chat. We'll stay as long as the super chats are coming in. All right. Can you put that up there, Frank? Click it up there. All right. Metal Man $5 super chat. 2 girls killed. You were there. Bro didn't come forward until after screenshots was shown. Bro had 20-something's phone, but not the 2017 one. Guilty. Metal Man, I appreciate your opinion. I get it. Didn't come forward until screenshot. Like, ooh, let me go be Mr. Cooperative guy, right? I think that's what you're saying, Metal Man, right? Let me go cooperate. Yeah, I was there, but I didn't do anything wrong. I'm just a innocent guy, middle-aged guy that likes to take walks by himself, where the teenagers like to hang out and take photos. And I know. All right. I want to thank everybody for joining us. I truly appreciate all of you taking the time to do it. Hopefully you enjoyed the discussion. I certainly enjoyed having people call, reading all the comments and chats coming in as well. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to continue the conversation, I think there's something down there that Frank has linked up so you could join and be a Patreon member. And once again, we'll take your calls too. Normally the Patreon saved is where the calls are saved from. Real quick, can you speak to, I missed it. Another super chat, Frank. Deb N, can you speak a bit to why his confessions weren't listened to by his lawyers so this trial could have been avoided? Oh, it was going to trial. Just because you have a confession doesn't mean your guy did it. That's what the defense was saying. Listen, I guarantee you there was no offer in this case. Or if the offer it was plead guilty to both counts or all 4 counts, go to prison for the rest of your life. They were going to trial. They were going to trial. I've done many a trial with a confession. I've done many a trial where it's on video. But if the offer sucks and the DA really thinks they want to continue with that offer, okay, game on. Let's rumble. You may get a conviction. You probably will, but I'm going to do everything in my power to make you crawl over glass to get there. There you go. Another one. Why do you think the defense used the headphone data? It seemed to make their defense more confusing. Well, they were trying to raise reasonable doubt. The reason was because somebody plugged those headphones in, apparently after, as I understand it correctly, after the prosecution said that the the murder had been committed. So somebody down there plugging in their headphones into the phone. I don't know. All right. Shampoo Champion, thanks for the super chat. Appreciate it. Or remember, I can't remember what that is. But anyway, thank you all for watching. Like I said, if you'd like to continue the conversation, become a Patreon member and you'll get a link. We're going to go do that show here in just a minute. And once again, we'll take your calls as well. Everybody, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on Crime Talk. And remember, the Constitution matters, ladies and gentlemen.